yeah, so I mean, it's a trip. We talked about the natives as well. So, and I mean, I was one of the natives that was in the recovery rooms of AA. He was in there for 24 years. Another lifer, and you know how they had sweat lodges. I don't know
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
remember the
yeah, yeah.
sweat
Sweat lodge.
lodges and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
I wanted to get in there,
yeah.
but I couldn't. And I met this dude, and he was a really cool cat. He had something that I wanted, and it was real recovery, is what it was. And I knew that I had to tap into people like that, so I wouldn't come into the revolving door aspect, and my life would be over. Like 80 something% of everybody in there was a revolving door,
Yeah.
and so it was crazy. I went through the first 3 steps, did a 4 step where you write down everything that you did in life that you don't like, and then the 5th step is where you read it to your sponsor. I asked him to be my sponsor. He said, "Yeah." It was like first, and
Mm.
so it was crazy. I was when I went to do a 5th step. I went to do a 5th step with him, and I'll never forget. He says, "I can't do the 5th step with you," and I'm like, "What are you fucking talking about? Like, we're working these steps. I'm trying to better my life." And he says, "If you tell me something and I hear it, and it's against prison politics, I might have to kill you." Right? And he's right about that.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't know what the fuck I'm
yeah,
gonna. You gotta tell all the things you regret in life, to another human being. That's what a 5th step is. Right? And the 4th step is writing out everything you don't fucking like about yourself and what you did, and being able to turn it over to somebody else and ripping it up and burning it. So he took it into the sweat lodge. Everything I wrote, didn't read it. I mean, he just threw it in the fire. Says, and it's all gone.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
forgive.
yeah.
That was a cool moment, but um, it came up to my parole date. I remember my parole date. It was I remember it's just a fucking trip, man. This is bringing back great memories and scary times. And the worst part about prison, and we'll talk about this if we can, and we have enough time in the end, is this bullshit attraction that we put out there as convicts to attract the younger generation to come up. And life isn't fucking good in prison. There's not a fucking
No.
good. We fuck up our lives, and there's no attraction to it. But we want to come out with these war stories like life is great, and it's affecting our younger generation horribly. But coming when I was getting ready to parole, my date was up. I knew I had more cases, right? Because I was right, not the grievance, but you write that one form where you go in, you try to get all your shit together. I
Oh,
had
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
felonies
yeah,
out there that were
yeah.
still not part of
Get
the.
everything run concurrent.
Yeah, I couldn't get it. So I knew something was happening, but I remember going to. I remember um, going to a meetings right before I was having to go, and I remember being fucking scared to leave because I was afraid of what would happen, that I'd be out the gate and in the spoon back to the pen by 10. I feared going out of prison because I didn't have my life I built. Like, where was I going to go? These are normal things that all of
Yeah.
us really go through. What are we going to do? I didn't have family out there to pick
So
me
did
up
you lose
either.
everything when you went to prison?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so um, paroling. When I knew I had a case in county I was going to beat, so I got fucking 2 top cigarettes, man. I got rubber gloves. I keistered fucking weed, or not weed, but tobacco in my fucking asshole because I knew I was going back to county jail for fighting more cases,
Yeah.
and that's what happened. But I remember going back to county. I'm like, fuck. You go to dress out, getting when you're getting paroled. Here's your clothes. You can dress out. And they say, here's your clothes, so and so. They're handing everybody else's out, and they say, Mr. King, now you're going on a different bus, right? And I knew it. I ended up in county fighting another case, but fuck, I lived like a king, rolling fucking pinner, fucking cigarettes, right? Soups, everything. I ended up fighting a case. I ended up getting out, and I stayed in recovery when I got out. They said, "What's the first thing you do when you get out?" I remember when I was at the last meeting, they said, "It's very easy. Raise your hand and say, my name's Patrick. I'm a fucking addict, and you know, I need a sponsor, a temporary sponsor." And I did that as soon as I got out. I raised my hand, and somebody, it was crazy. Even to go, there's so much happened in this time frame. But the guy that brought H and I hospitals and institution meetings into that. He brought the meetings in weekly, every week. He'd bring meetings in, and I forget his fucking name. Anyways, I ended up getting paroled when you can be anywhere in the Bay Area. I was in Solano, Soco County, right? Was that, or not Coco, but wherever it was, Solano. Or anyways, not Solano. It was a part of Coco County. I forget. Anyways, I ended up going to a meeting, and I raised my hand, and that dude from H&I, out of any meeting that could have been in the world, he was in that fucking room.
Oh shit,
bro! Out of anything, like if God doesn't, if God isn't fucking good in work, this is how it works. You apply yourself, right, and you get rewarded. Like I could have went many different directions, and I saw him, and he became my temporary sponsor on the outside, and he ended up dying a few years after that, and I was able to go up to the podium and speak to his whole family. There's so many people in recovery, and his family was, and being able to, honor him was saving my life, because
wow.
that's what he did. He saved my life. It was giving back, right? It was what he did. Freely went in and brought that to me out of just a couple people he touched, because nobody was showing up. I was one of them that was touched. So, God works in mysterious ways or whatever. And there I was. And, I decided to keep the hustle going and started working. It's really hard. I went to a couple halfway houses. I had Santa Clara County is where that sent me to fucking prison, and I got paroled to a different county. I got put in a drug facility in a different county, and then all of a sudden, Santa Clara County said, "I don't care where you're at. You're under our jurisdiction. You have 24 hours to show up to my office." So I had to leave one county where I already had a parole officer, go down to Santa Clara County, and my parole officer says, "I don't give a fuck about you." He goes, "My job's to put you back in prison. That is my job," right? He goes, "You're a number, you're going back." And I'm like, fuck, man, that's that revolving door shit I kept seeing, right? These are all the things you young guys that or us old guys don't tell you. The misery of fucking life that happens, and it's not glorified. We're not glorified, right? No. We have war stories. We have one war story and 10 fucking hell story to every one story. Right? It's not glorified. Our lives is just not glorified. And so I get in there. I finally get in a halfway house in San Jose, and the house manager's fucking shooting heroin, and everybody else in the house is shooting heroin. And I'm like, fuck, it was just, the temptation is overwhelming. And the hookers are coming over to the house, and I was the guy that, they're like, will we trust this motherfucker or not? He's going to meetings, we're not. And I'm like, you know what, man? Give me all your meeting slips. I'll get them all signed. I'll come back. So I was doing recovery, and I'm signing their slips and getting their slips lined and bringing them back to them, until the point where I come home one night and there's fucking cops at the house, and they had a hooker come over, and they all did what they did, got her all fucked up, and she walked out of the house and walked into the street, ran over by a car right in front of the street. And these guys were punk motherfuckers, man, couldn't go out and help her. They all hid out of fear that the cops were going to find them. And she's laying out in the street, moving, and another car runs her over and kills her, right, a few minutes later. And so I come home, and they think I'm the one that's going to like snitch them all out or something, right? So house manager calls my fucking parole officer, says this motherfucker is everything he possibly, he's not doing program. We don't want him here anymore. Turns me into my fucking parole officer.
And you've been looking out for these dudes.
I'm watching, right? I'm watching these motherfuckers. I just didn't fit in their shoe.
I
wasn't in their car
because
I chose not to.
Yeah.
I could have fucking drove that motherfucking car. Like, I have that ability.
Yeah.
And I chose not to, because my life was going another direction. And so I went through a whole nother hell, not getting violated, and sent it back, and I didn't. And I ended up, finally I ended up kicking parole, and I became I became a builder developer. I was building houses in Santa Cruz County, down in Watsonville. Did a 306 home subdivision did grading. I was a project manager of that. And then I just, and this whole time in recovery, here's the other thing with weed. We go into the weed situation, and me being an addict, and I like to talk about this, but I don't. And the reason I don't is because I don't want to attract the younger generation and think things are okay, because it worked for me. Because weeds and addictive. It's an you can be addicted to weed. You can be addicted to anything. Some people says it's non-addictive or whatever it is, but for me it was different. So I went when I paroled and I got through all that shit. I stayed in the rooms of recovery, and I stayed abstinent from everything. I ran 10 years plus. I had a couple kids. I was living great, building fucking homes. I was like in the prime of my life, but I wasn't happy. I was happy as a father, but it wasn't more my passion. It's what drives me to where I'm at today. And I was always in fear that if I partaked in anything, I'd have the monkey on my back, and I would be back to just where I was in the addiction, and it works like that for a lot of things, but cannabis wasn't like that for me. So, as somebody, we talked earlier about being fucked up in your head, not having these labels that all these children have today. I had every fucking label that there was back then. I had depression, I had loneliness, I had abandonment issues, OCD, I was dyslexic, I'm ambidextrous. They told me that's fucked up too.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like and I could never shut my head off. And I have always had a hard time sleeping. And so, hindsight is after I moved to Northern California, I was making soil, right? I was selling it to cannabis people. I'm growing cannabis, started growing. This is as I'm a builder developer. I'm living the fucking life. Like, I had financial security, homes, property, but I'm an agricultural guy from a child. Like, my
Hmm.
hands have to be in the
That's your
soil.
passion.
It's my passion and my purpose. And cannabis, and so I was always afraid if I partaked in cannabis during this time that I'd be shooting fucking methamphetamines and running down the street doing right where I put me what everything at that moment that I was in. My biggest fear is that moment before I went to prison. And I remember that. I remember that issue. I remember that feeling where I can't stop this. How am I ever going to get out of this mode? I got all this hustle and everything, but I'm addicted. I'm an addict. I got to wake up and fucking shoot some fucking crank so I can get on, so I can do my street hustle, so I can do my side hustle. And I was always in this fear of that coming back to me. And what I found out is that cannabis to me was the opposite.
Mm.
So, like, even today, I smoke a joint. I'm an entrepreneur. I haven't worked for anybody in 24 fucking years. I'm self-sufficient, and and for me, cannabis is an outlet. So I work really hard. I grind all day long. At the end of the day, I smoke a joint, and it puts me out, and I
Mm.
can relax. My phone now goes down. Social media, business calls, the business mind thinking, this fucked up mind, that's always working on what's the next thing and how am I going to get over here. I'm going to do. The hustle just never fucking stops in my brain, and cannabis shuts that off. So medically, it is the perfect drug for me,
Mm.
and it works. It really works for me. And so knowing that going into back into what the drug scene or the cannabis scene, I realized my purpose was when I realized what it did for my life, it wasn't a bad thing, that I went hard against it. And I was activism. I was an activist for cannabis through the 215 movement. I showed up. I did everything from on cannabis, and I grow the best fucking cannabis in the world. I have, and I still do. From a child, man. It's
Oh
like
wow! So you turned that whole industry that you had learned as a child into something now that has grown into something that's international.
totally.
And
Yeah,
so the Soil King brand, um, that brand, I mean, if you go into any cannabis store or anything in agriculture, that brand is like a staple for people who are trying to grow organic cannabis
exactly.
without the chemicals. I know because you told me about that before about like how a lot of people don't understand like the soil, how important that is when you're trying to almost like when they talk about farmers now with the soil and
Hmm.
the the different chemicals and stuff that's in the soil, how that affects the food. It's the same thing with the cannabis.
So that was I was years and years ahead of the agricultural movement about living soil. What is living soil and why does it do it in cannabis? When I was growing cannabis, and especially back in the 215 movement, was the California medical movement. Dennis Perone, San Francisco, and all these legends, Eddie Lepp, Jack Hare, all these figments of the cannabis industry started the 215 movement. A bunch of other people. What I realized back then is that, and because I built a garden center and a soil yard and I was building soils, what I realized is that everybody was grabbing, this heavy pesticides, this Avid, where you have to suit completely up because you can't breathe this stuff, it'll kill
Wow.
you. And all of a sudden they're selling it through these retail outlets, and people were spraying it all over their cannabis plants, whole bottle of this stuff, and killing any kind of bugs or anything that could go on it. Um, and then you're calling this cannabis medicine, packaging up, drying it, making vape carts out of it.
Mm.
You take a bottle of Avid or heavy pesticides, you put it on this plant, a couple, 3 or 4 applications, and it's saturating this plant. Then you dry that product and it shrinks up, right? Then you take that product and you extract it, and now you're extracting it and you're bringing all of that heavy, harmful, toxic pesticide and you're compounding it back into a vial that you put in a vape cart and you're smoking it. You're fucking killing people in the
Wow.
name of medicine. You're smoking, burning weed, and it's saying it's healthy for you, but it isn't. See, for me, when it says medicinal, it meant something. So I went super hard at testing soil, testing fertilizers, looking for heavy metals, looking for herbicides, finding what the meaning of GMO really meant, non-GMO products, and really diving in pre-agricultural industry. They still don't. Agriculture doesn't even talk about it. The cannabis level is like, I don't know how to explain this easy. On testing limits for now for cannabis is on just arsenic. Arsenic comes from water.
Mm.
Arsenic comes from, all that fucking
Chemtrails and all of
chemtrails in the
yeah.
sky. All
Yeah.
that stuff comes with it. In cannabis, we test at the flower level 0.2 parts per million. Anything above that is a failure and it's unhealthy, right? In agriculture, it's 5.0 parts per million.
Wow.
So agriculture
Wow.
it's
That's
unfucking believable.
crazy.
And a lot of them don't even test for any of it.
Wow.
These OMRI certified programs, they're all,
Wow.
anyways, not to go deep down that
Yeah,
road, but
yeah.
my passion has always been in testing. And when I realized I can use cannabis and it was for medicinal, it changed my fucking world all of a sudden. I said, well, is it medicinal or is it not? What makes it out of medicinal? Well, this kind of shit does it. So, all my energy and drive went into changing the world on what it really was about to be truly organic, regenerative style, the industry. And I'm known all over the world, and I speak. I'm a keynote speaker. I do things. I create fertilizers. I have Big Root soil that's world renowned, super cleanest soil on the market. Water only. You put water in it. You put a plant in it. It grows. If you're going to be using a bunch of bottled nutrients. So you think about in agriculture alone, all this chemical fertilizers, all these liquid fertilizers are a byproduct of the petroleum industry. It's the leftover waste
Oil
from the
base.
petroleum industry, right? That
Yeah.
becomes a nitrate and that's what grows. Where did that come from? How did in the 50s when they were doing the atom bombs, they realized that we were annihilating these other countries, like Guam we did, or not Guam, it wasn't Guam, what was it, Taiwan, and so they were
Japan.
Japan, yeah, and we were blowing up these islands and just exploding them with these atoms, with these atom bombs and these bombs, and then the regrowth happened so quick. They realized, fuck, this actually, in the positive, it grows everything back. So they started making it as a fertilizer.
But didn't it even happen before that? I didn't mean to cut you off because remember when the medical industry, when the petroleum companies seen that they can come in and take over the medical work. Remember, it was a bunch of herbalists.
Yeah.
Remember, everybody was health there. They had
Yeah.
the guys who were like considered like would be considered like a Dr. CB back then. They were healing people with stuff that was naturally found, and they're like, dude, we got to control this. We can't have people
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
using the. So then everything became rather than plant based, it became petroleum based.
What was that guy? What's the family name? I'm trying to
Rockefeller.
Rockefellers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
that was
the
the
whole they bought that
Rockefellers.
whole
Yeah.
they financed the medical
Yeah.
and they pushed all the people who were more into botany and herbalists and they
They
pushed
made
them.
it illegal.
Yeah,
Hemp was
yeah,
a huge factor in the late 40s and
yeah.
50s. Hemp was growing out. They pushed hemp and cannabis out. Cannabis is dated back before Christ, right? It was a holy anointed oil. They used it medicinally. It was a barter trade ingredient, just like beer was when they made
Yeah,
alcohol.
yeah,
That was a form of currency
yeah. Like
back
cinnamon,
then.
like spices, that all that
Yeah.
stuff was like yeah, it was trade. It was like it was a coveted, almost like a I'm not gonna say like a spice or herb that people would barter with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's botanicals, So you just like you said with the Rockefellers, they had seen everybody can grow their own botanicals. Let's make everything illegal. Now you can't get a botanical manufacturing license. You can't put anything together. They
that's
just
crazy.
stopped. They stopped everything and owned the industry. And here we are, still sucking off their fucking nipple in every aspect that you look at it. You go to buy a box of Frosted Flakes. Got so much glyphosates and other things in it.
Oh man,
It's killing our kids. It's killing
yeah,
us. It's
yeah.
insane, man.
I know, and when you tapped on it a little bit, when you said about the food, because I was going to ask him, like, damn, if cannabis, if you can, test the soil for that to make sure we're getting a more pure cannabis. What about like, when you go to, somebody thinks, oh, I'm going to Whole Foods, I'm going to Sprouts, I'm getting all this,
Bro,
and it's like that shit is it's not really,
it,
it's not what you think, huh?
it is and it isn't. It's better than the conventional type of farming,
But it's yeah,
synthetic, and
yeah,
it is better because you do have sort of CDFA. You have Omri.
certain
Omri's
testing.
80% organic is best. They're trying to do it. And just to not to go, I can go in down this
I
fucking
know.
rabbit hole. But if you just think about what a street sweeper picks up in San Francisco, human fucking feces, lots of it, right? You got syringes, you got pharmaceuticals, you got radiator fluid, you got
All
engine
type of
oil, you got
yeah.
even the oil one of the biggest contaminants to the street is rain that hits that
The aqua
tar
comes down.
tar
Yeah.
tar roof, and it all washes down. All that's picked up. So that street sweeper goes to the municipality green waste dump site, backs up, dumps it in. They make compost out of it. Omri comes and certifies that compost, and then they sell it back to you. And now these the regenerative or these farms that are using this organic label farms are growing our food in it, right? So
Oh
now you go to these. So
wow.
this is a next level of shit of attack
Wow.
Soil Kings coming out on it. So, but it all goes through education. And so my biggest thing with cannabis, because you can go into when you go out and you like obviously to read labels and eat
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that are good
yeah,
for you, right? And you like a good healthy steak, and you
yeah.
want something, and if it's grass fed and it's raised right, you even taste it, you feel better eating it. If you go to the Sprouts, you're looking at the section, you're looking at the good vegetables, right? You know that consciously you're feeding better things, and it is better than the conventional. Or so I always say to people in cannabis, they don't see that. You can't go to a dispensary and look for an organic section. It doesn't exist. In cannabis, everything is synthetic, right? So you got all these cultivators out there growing with all these fucking bottled nutrients. Horrible process of cultivating, and now there's then they got to flush all this shit out of it, and then they sell it back to you. And so I ask everybody this: if you're conscious about your food, if you're a type of person, we go to the gym, we're taking care of our health, we really are conscious about our food choices, and how come you're not conscious about your cannabis choices when you go to a dispensary? You can't go to a dispensary and find a section of Sprouts, but you can go to your food sources and you can, so this is really a huge fight with me because medicinal value in cannabis is essential. The compounds, the terpenes, everything, the whole plant extraction process is so medicinal. But when you go to these stizzy fucking vape carts with fake terps where they have these hydrocarbon extraction machines that break it all apart. You can take the shittiest grown weed, and you can extract it with hydrocarbon, and you could build back a vape cart with tastes like bubble gum, and people will buy it left and right, and they'll sell it to you, and you'll consciously thinking it's medicinal, but it's everything but,
Wow.
right?
Well, I remember too. You were telling me when you went and you tested a bunch of the different products on the market that said they had so much CBD or so much this,
Yeah.
and you said, "Man, you came back and it was like, dude, it was horrible."
We have a CBD company. I have CBD genetics. Mama's boy, so I was really hard. I carried my mom out of this world. I brought her back in. I actually built a house, being a builder developer, and had a hard childhood with my mom, but I was able to carry her out of this world, and I love that part, right? And so she was given 90 days to live with lung cancer, stage 4, and she lived for 22 months after that. And I kept her at home, and I moved in with her, and I took care of her. And in the meantime, I was growing these CBD strains, and so I was making these tinctures and all this different stuff, and for my mom, and prolonging her life out of this, and it extended it. And what it did, it would allowed my mom to have hunger and be able to eat and be able to live. And so she did take, the pharmaceuticals that they gave her for pain and things like that on a minimal scale. So she was the cannabis is a yin to yang with somebody going through chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
I hear this all the time: is screw the chemo and screw the medicine, just take cannabis. I'm telling you right now, it's the best. We chose not to do chemo with my mom, but we did the pharmaceuticals. And the yin to the yang is that it made her lose her appetite, the pharmaceuticals, yet it took her out of a little bit of pain. But with the compounds and terpenes of cannabis and the CBD and a little bit of THC and these ointments I was making, these RSOs, I was able to give that essential part back to my mom and take her out of this world. My mom, on her deathbed, the last morning she was alive, my mom looked at me in the eyes, and she knew I was right there with her.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's a special moment to be able to do that. So when I was talking to you about the CBD, we have a dog CBD company out of Oregon, and with that it's hemp full CBD. So in the CBD, there's no regulation whatsoever. So when you go to the store, you see a grocery store, you see a CBD product, or you go to especially a pet store, and you see these CBD products. Well, it's all fucking bullshit. There's no one testing to say how much CBD is in it, if it's extracted, if there's leftover residuals of solvents, if there's heavy metals, all this other bad stuff that's in that plant. There's no overpowering big brother that has a regulation saying this is what it is. In cannabis we do, in hemp we don't. And so we started testing our competitors off the shelf, and we found it was 23% of what we tested from, and this was all pet products. 23% of the pet products that claimed to have CBD in it had no CBD in it. Right?
Wow.
Over 70% of the claims did not meet what was even in it. Right? So I mean, and then you'll look at it and they'll say, yeah, we have testing. Here's our test results. Test results have to match the batch number, so they don't have batch numbers on that stuff.
Mm.
And these third-party analytic testing labs that they're using are names you can't even ever look up because they're fucking fake as fuck, right? They could have unregulated testing equipment. You can manipulate the testing equipment. It's horse shit. The whole fucking market was horse shit. So we came out with a CBD product, and we tested at the level of cannabis, and we made sure that everything, if it said what we had in it, that it had more than what our claims were. And everything is super clean. And even better part of it is we have human products, and it's the exact same formula as it should be. The human products and the pet products are exactly the same. One's just marketed to the pets, and one's marketed to the human. Now you can on most of the pet products that are out there, it'll say these aren't for human consumption. If it's not for fucking human consumption, why give it to your animal? Unless you don't love your animal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It makes sense. So for people who are looking to connect with you, man, what is your social media so people can kind of find you and and maybe network or
Yeah.
hit you up about some business or something.
It's at the Soil King. So on YouTube you can find it, on Instagram, on pretty much all the social media platforms. You can Google it. It's just at and then THE the Soil SOIL King KING, and that you can send me messages. I run all my social media sites, and yeah.
And I'll put all the links in the description, and that way you guys can click on the links, and we'll be collaborating more, man. We're both out here in AZ,
We're both Bay Area boys,
both from
or
the Bay, you know what I
NorCal.
mean,
Uh,
NorCal, and so it's a blessing that I was able to be introduced to this person through another mutual friend, and we were able to make this happen, man. Because it's hard to find real ones out there, man. People that are who they say they are and have a good heart. There's so many fake people out there on social media selling you bullshit, pretending to be something they're not. And my whole thing for 2024 is networking with the real. If a person's not who they say they are, I don't have time. I don't want to deal with them. So I don't want to take too much of this man's time. I know he's a busy man. He's got a lot going on, and I want to keep you guys in the loop with other interviews and other things going on. So hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Big Herc 916, the Soil King, and yeah, appreciate you guys. Bad kid. Officially, I only got one real spanking my entire life. My mom did the best a 14-year-old could do, raising me with love and instilling values that will last a lifetime. I was a straight A student and lived to make her happy. So how did I go astray? A horrible stepdad that stole my self-worth and invoked fear turned me into a person that I struggled to overcome. From skateboarding to selling drugs, gang banging in juvenile hall, I got caught the same way many young promising men get caught up. I struggled to find my identity, getting mixed up in shootouts, crime, and the adult entertainment industry. This roller coaster continued as I juggled college, hustling, and Hollywood, eventually catching a federal bank robbery case. I found redemption in prison while serving a 120-month federal sentence and came out a man on a mission. I became a social media influencer with over 500 million views on YouTube and a life coach mentoring people all over the world. This is my journey against all odds. Lockdown's over. Get your yard time in.
But
Exclusively at
smelly ball sack and a funky hoo-ha. Big Herc said, wash that ass. Take you up to